My name is Freddie Spencer, and this is the Soul Machine Podcast, and I welcome everyone that's viewing this today and everyone that's going to be watching it later. I am so excited to introduce the guest today because of one, the respect I have for him and how good he is at what he does, but also how we actually got connected. I go back a few years when I was still doing the chairman of the stewards panel, which is like being the referee of Grand Prix racing for everybody out there, or referee of a football game, if you don't know motorsports. But in our profession, MotoGP, and that championship is the top level. And I was asked to come in and restructure a little bit the stewards panel as the first chairman. And I want to tell you, it is a thankless job. I say that not as a negative, but because I learned so much through it, because I'm a big believer in you never stop learning. And I learned a lot about not only myself, but how you interact with others. Because you can imagine the emotional release that it is any sport, but especially on a sport where you're working with a piece of equipment, a motorcycle in this case, and you're really pushing hard and you exert every emotion, all your mental capacity, all your abilities, and you're being watched by tens of thousands of people, millions on TV, and your performance is being judged. And so I understood that. But some days, there would be riders that weren't happy about my decision, and multiple riders, and decision of the stewards panel, because it's a 3-person panel that I was in charge of. But sometimes even whole countries, weren't happy with my decision or the decision we made. But the thing is, like I said, I learned from it. And one of the things that helped me, long-winded way to get to it, was one night I was in Kuala Lumpur and I went on Spotify and I was looking for something to listen to, and I came across someone that I had known. And I knew their name. I didn't know them personally, but I knew who they were, and they were funny, and I remember that. So anyway, I clicked on the podcast, and it was, I believe it was the Thursday before Friday before Monday podcast that Bill does, along with his Monday morning podcast, because he does 2 a week. Bill really likes to talk, which he'll tell you about. But I was listening to it, and it made me feel better, Camille. And that was an eye-opening thing for me. It made me realize really how much stress I was feeling, and this was my outlet. And I listened to Bill for about 3 years, and pretty much every night after, the day of being the chairman of the stewards panel and calling penalties and having to talk to riders and teams. And so it was a way that it actually was my outlet. And I am so thankful for that. Now, one thing that I learned from it is how much Bill liked MotoGP. And he would watch the races, and he would watch the incidents that would happen, and then question, how did they get to that decision and things. And so Bill's saying that on his podcast. I'm sitting in a hotel room, and I'm hollering into my phone, of course, hopefully no one is hearing outside my room, that I can answer that question for him. And I couldn't imagine that one day I would get the chance to actually explain something. I felt it. I felt that was going to happen. I can't explain why. I believe in those things. Things happen for a reason. And just sure enough, a few years later, it was last year, this project that I got contacted by to do and work with, Bill is involved with it too. And they mentioned that. And I said, I got a great story about how I know who Bill is. And then they said, well, we'd love to share that with Bill. I think Bill would love to hear that. And then next thing I know, they contact Bill, and then he sends a message back, hey, I'd love to have Freddie on my podcast. And it was like perfect. because I know exactly what I'm going to talk about, and how much Bill had helped me, and I'm not ashamed to say that, helped me through those tough days and tough nights. And it's a privilege, and I'm thankful for that, and that's why I'm so excited for him to be on the show and to tell his story.
Yeah, and I was blown away that you even knew who I was. And as I got into MotoGP about 10 years ago, I don't just get into something and just go with it. I go back to see how did it get here, and that's when I learned about all of you guys. And then, Fast Freddie Spencer, that's one of the coolest names ever. And I was
Well,
like, oh
thank
my
you,
God,
Bill.
this guy won the 250 and 500 in the same year. And I'm just thinking, like, what if he crashed during the 250? Then he's got to get on a 5, like the same day is, that's like some NHL hockey player times 200 miles an hour. And I also loved, there was a while, I don't know if the MotoGP website still does it, but they had classic races on there. And what I've noticed about old motorcycle racing and Formula One is the terrifying sound. Like the sound of it felt like somebody could die here. Like this is crazy. And you guys also look like, like those riding leathers that you had back then. They just, as opposed to now, it looks like they have like a jet engine on the back of them. I was just like, I was beyond blown away. And when my producing partner said, oh yeah, Freddie Spencer wants to be on your podcast or something like that, I literally was like, that guy knows who I am. It was, that's one of the coolest things that's happened to me, in this business, is when people that I am a fan of and I respect, I find out that they even remotely like what I do. Is that's good fuel to keep me going.
Well, Bill, I that is the biggest compliment that I probably have had, and I really appreciate that, and the fact that, I could feel and tell from listening to you. It was like I knew one day I was going to get a chance at some point, didn't know when or how, but to be able to say to you, hey, Bill, you remember that time you asked about Alex and Pecco, and right? On your podcast that I was listening to. And that's amazing to me too. So
it's amazing
really
to me with all
that.
your accomplishments that you would take the time out to talk to a stand-up comedian about what exactly went on between Alex and Pecco is pretty cool too.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is really amazing to me is the fact of your knowledge and understanding of what you need to do. And I recognize that when we talked, and what you need to do to get better. And it's why I talked about that it would be my privilege, for you and I to ride together. And I know I could help you, of course, and help you to enjoy.
I need a lot of help.
Yeah, well, I think you're gonna be better because. Listen, I had a school for 11 years in Vegas, and I had a lot of people, well-known people, and people that were very good in their chosen profession that, I talk about putting something, nicely. The best I could say is that they really need a lot of help, and in part of that was because I could tell right away how they absorb information, which I learned, whether you say the hard way, but the street way, just in real life experiences riding my motorcycle, because I could relate it to my own learning ways and problems of how I absorbed information. And so it was really interesting talking to you because you catch on really fast. That is a quality that is needed to be able, as a teacher, for the person you're working with to absorb it, recognize it, and understand that they need help in this area. So that's my compliment, Bill.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, it's true.
That's not easy for a guy to say, though, that I need help. I've learned that as I've gotten.
That's one of the things I want to point out, though, which I think is so cool. In order to learn from my experience, you have to be humble. Like, you have to humble yourself in order to take on new information, in order to grow. And that's a hard thing to do. And you see it happen at the track a lot. People talk about one thing and then it shows up another way. To be willing to say that, like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to be patient with myself and allow myself to, like, kind of burn. It's for me, it's a physical feeling to, like, it feels like almost shame or embarrassment in a sense to, like, admit that I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Formerly, that was a barrier for me. I didn't progress for a really long time. I had to learn how to learn. And
How did you do that?
Repeated failure, crash after crash, man. Figuratively, I came from a difficult childhood myself, and I was kicked out of high school my freshman year. I was able to stay because my dad came in and told the guidance counselor that his daughter wasn't
tell
getting
Bill
kicked out.
who your dad was.
Oh, my dad was an actor, Robert Conrad. He did shows in the 60s like Wild West and Black Sheep Squadron.
Hey, I'm almost 58. I know who he is.
Okay. So my dad's from the south side of Chicago. And we can get into that later, rough and tumble type scenario. But in high school, like I said, barely graduated, thought I was stupid, was in tons of trouble, thought I was like a bad kid or whatever. And then when I left the house at 17, all of that just accelerated. And I was hospitalized for an eating disorder. I went to rehab twice. You know, I was just eating it left and right. But I had to, one of the things that I heard you say that I thought was really interesting is you said, when I learn something, I don't just like do it. Like, I go back to the beginning, right? When you were learning about who Freddie Spencer is, like, you go back to the source. And in my brief research that I was doing about you and your extensive career, I was learning about a little bit about your childhood in Boston and your father's influence, and anger being kind of like a motivating, and comedy kind of being synonymous, and how you were able to work through that. I, you know, kind of similarly had to find my voice in a sense. And it was challenging. It hurt. I had to fall on the sword, so to speak, repeatedly, and essentially end up taking responsibility for a problem that I didn't create, which was a crux, I feel like. But once I did that, hard. Oh yeah, that's the crux. You know, it sucks. But I feel like once you do that, it's kind of like when you were talking about your wife, you're like, these are my parameters. And it's like with the racetrack too. It's like, for me, once I establish these rules, you know, which are, that kind of govern existence that you see out on the track, now I can work within that framework, and it's given me such freedom. Like, I can't drink. I know that. I don't need to F around with whether or not I can do that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I eliminate that, and that rule gives me freedom. And I learned that the hard way, the wrong way, through repeated failure, and by, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but like through the grace of God, like, I didn't choose to have an awakening, you know? And like, not saying that I'm awakened, but I kind of got some sense knocked into me in a sense. And that's because I did everything wrong and was granted the chance to understand it differently. Yeah, you know? And so I can't be like, well, I did this on purpose and I went to rehab, and like they say in AA, you have to surrender, right? I'm like, to what? How? And I grew up fighting. So it's like, how am I going to let go and of what? But, you know, circumstance provided a surrender where I hit my knees and I said, Uncle, and I realized that I am not, there's a power greater than I am. I can simplify that to a current in a stream. You know, try and swim upstream. People are like, it's like swimming upstream. I'm like, try it. And then you kind of realize that pecking order you were talking about, that was really instrumental for me. And I'm wondering if you can relate kind of to any of that, how comedy has if it's been kind of this current for you, and if any of that is relatable, and the responsibility kind of factor, and whether or not you internalized any of this like anger or frustration, or if you were always cognizant of being able to check it and transmute it.
Well, my anger, I always had a temper, but it didn't really come out until my 30s, where my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I don't mean like professionally. Like I wasn't married and didn't have any kids. I was like, what is going on with me? So rather than, and I didn't really ask that. So I just sort of projected it all onto women. So I had all of this misogynist shit in my act. And like, I didn't believe any of it. What I was really saying is like, I want to find love. I want to be married. I want to have kids. I don't know how to do it. I need help. But like, you're not, the way they raised, boys to be men, you were not allowed to say that. You like if you said, I don't know what I'm doing, I need help. It's like, what are you, a sissy and blah 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 and all of that type of stuff. So then you get that in your head. So you're not even like in your own moment by yourself. You don't even give yourself grace. You're like you're being a sissy, you're being a wimp, you're not being a man. So what happened with me was when I finally had a real significant breakthrough. I was doing an acting gig, and I would always have sort of these emotional moments that I couldn't understand where they were coming from. I would be doing a line, and all of a sudden I would feel like I wanted to cry, and I would be like, "What? Like this isn't sad what I'm saying. What is this?" And I realized on this latest acting gig what it was because of the way they raised kids when I grew up. 99% of my emotions were walled off because they were given a negative definition. And what I was left was I sort of navigated life with like two or three emotions. One of them being anger, just not caring or making a joke or whatever. And then I realized when I acted is these characters I'm playing are feeling things that I sort of put in the vault. So then I would open the door. So what's coming out is all of these emotions that, I didn't allow myself to feel. So then I would have someone said like misdirected anger. It was like misdirected like emotions. So like, I think as a guy, if you're going to start to cry, your natural instinct is to stop it from happening. Look at the ground until it goes away, and then you think it goes away. It doesn't go away.
Right.
It's still in there. Now it has to figure out a different way to come out, and there goes your anger or your overreaction, your depression. So I kind of figured that out on this last acting gig I had, and I was like, oh, so I guess when I act, I open the door, and all of this stuff comes out.
Right.
But then when I go back to my life, I close the door. And then I'm back to this guy. So what if I leave the door open? And leaving the door open, now all of a sudden, if something doesn't go my way, I have like 30 different emotions that I can have. I can be frustrated, like flabbergasted, all of this stuff that I just locked away. And it was like I was playing cards with, instead of, 52 cards, I had 3 cards. And then the other 49 were behind the thing. So now I'm playing,
with a full deck.
I'm kind of playing with a full deck. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to anyway. But then what I had to do is I had to have a new relationship with anger. With the same, because then I started the way I didn't validate crying. I then was like, well, I don't want to be angry ever again. Like this is my sober angry day, December 1st, right? I had to be like, no, like, anger is also a valid emotion, but like carrying anger from stuff that happened years ago and then it comes out on somebody who wasn't there and did nothing about it, that's what I got to get rid of. But like, I don't think any emotions are necessarily. Well, I don't know. I would the one motion I never go to is vengeance. I feel like that's the darkest of all human emotions.
I agree.
To literally be plotting to get somebody. Yeah, but it's just dark. It's
I agree.
Like when I drank, I always stayed away from gin. I don't know what it was about gin, but I just felt like that was the quickest, most direct route to the devil. So yeah, tequila. Yeah, that was another one. So Yeah, so I learned that, and it's kind of cool that, by going after this dream that I had, that I was able to kind of fix myself.
Right. Well, the great thing is that you're saying in a nutshell what I believe is that you made something complicated and you viewed it simply and you got to your answer, right? Is you realized you didn't want to be that way. And I of course relate it all back to motorcycling, and I think that's so important for everybody listening out there, is where you have something that you're passionate about, that's your purpose, and finding that, and then that's how you're going to learn about life, right? Is through those struggles and mistakes and everything. And Bill, that's what I was saying a while ago, and you just reiterated it, is that I saw that when we first talked, and I saw, wow, Bill's going to be easy to work with because Bill is honest with himself, right? I mean, you got, right? It's humility, but it's honesty with yourself. Listen.
No, saying you don't know what you're doing is liberating, or saying I don't know what that word means, I need help. It just
Right.
now I don't have to carry this pressure of pretending. Like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. I mean, just it goes back to like when you're just being a little kid on the playground, and somewhere after the age of like 5, you're supposed to know everything, and if you don't know something, you don't know how to whistle. It starts off with simple things, and all of a sudden you feel like less than. So it becomes like this lying to other people. You start lying to yourself about yourself out of this protective thing.
Right.
And what it ends up doing, the comedy of life, is you prolong your pain. Where the liberation is being like, yeah, I as a little kid, I don't. Teach me.
You prolong and you compound it, I feel like. And an essential part for my like understanding has been, it's like we're talking about encountering failure and crashes and all this stuff and welcoming it. But two things. I grew up in, like I said, a rough and tumble environment. My dad was born on the south side of Chicago in 1935. He comes from a different era. He was super misogynistic. My mom was a teenage beauty queen, 25 years his junior, right? So there were some weird dynamics. Also, too,
a lot of stuff going on there.
Lot of stuff going on there, okay? And also, too, my dad was a tough guy, right? He did his own stunts. He's in the Stuntman's Hall of Fame. He'll knock you out with the straight right hand. He's a boxer. He's a tough guy, right?
And real quick, he didn't like batteries being knocked off his shoulder.
He'll knock
right?
it off.
But yeah, don't knock it off, right?
I remember that.
You remember that?
Go ahead, knock it off.
Knock it off, right? But he fathered and governed in the same way. And what I'm touching at is that when I view my father in hindsight, first of all, I love my dad, respect my dad. He had an amazing career. He was a flawed man, a complicated man, and a wounded man, right? And he had to be tough growing up. I get that. To heal, I think, and to really be tough, you have to soften. So for me, I inherited my dad's dialogue, right? It was critical, so I was talking to myself like that. I'm a piece of this. I'm stupid. I don't need that. I'm not a sissy. I'm a tough guy. But then in order to encounter difficulty and manage that, I had to learn how to be nice to myself through it, because you can't go through difficult situations if you're badgering yourself on top of it. I couldn't do that. So I had to learn how to soften and be kind to myself, which literally felt like some type of sacrilege. Yes.
That's what it felt like to me.
I had grown up being like, I don't need that BS. I don't need to be coddled. Are you kidding? Get out of here. And then for the lens to be flipped and be like, oh, you need to be gentle and you need to be kind to yourself. I was like, it literally felt like an assault. But with some practice, and I had to be face to face with it, right? Like, I'm in the psych ward of the Del Amo Hospital in the eating disorder unit, like on lockdown. It's like, you talk to yourself, nasty Camille, look in the mirror, or you're gonna die, dude. Like, that's kind of where I was at the time. So I had to. That's the only reason I did. But once I began to offer myself these kindnesses and talk to myself like I'm a good person and a nice human being that deserves love and is valued, that enabled me to then encounter difficult situations because I can say to myself, you've got it, babe. You're good, dog. You're okay. You got this. Is hard, baby. You're good. And I talk to myself like that, even today. And so, real quick, I'm watching my older sister's baby who's 4 years old. Complicated family dynamics. I have this kid right now, and she's got some difficult emotions. And so, very demonstrative, screaming, pushing the limits, it's challenging. And she's mad, and I know it. And so I have her in the bedroom last night, she's screaming, and I'm like, boo, I can hear you. I got you. I get her an FU pillow, like this little pillow, and I put it down on the ground. And I'm like, you're mad, dog? You got to get rid of that. It feels like a lot. And so I start banging on this little pillow with her, My mom has this little, my mom was an African safari guide. And so she's got this little cat call thing, and it makes sound like a jaguar. I'm like, you want to scream? Scream into the wildcat. Get it out. And I'm telling this little 4-year-old that when you yell, it hurts my ears. It hurts me. It hurts me, babe. But when you scream into this pillow and you do your little dance and you make your cat call, you get it out and you move it and it goes away, baby. And I'm not a parent myself, but I've spent a lot of time trying to reparent myself so that I could have successes on skis and motorcycles and have this conversation with you guys. And it's a challenging experience to be in right now, but I am so grateful to be able to have the patience to lay down with that little baby and beat a pillow with her and not snap and yell and tell her to get in her room. And I feel like it's because I've offered myself that kindness that now I can give it to my niece. And it hurt me, literally, to be able to offer that to myself, but I can see the benefit of it now. So I know that was long-winded, but I know we're talking about like crashing is essential and blah, blah, blah. The other side of that is that you have to be nice to yourself because otherwise you can't encounter it. You get a failure like, I suck, I'm out, I'm a loser, and then you just do this all the way down. But if you can...
How long did it take you to get over that? Because then you have to go out and push it to the limit, but then you're thinking in the back of your head, I don't want to wreck this again. So, and I figure, you guys deal in like milliseconds. So if you just back off just a little, that could be the difference. I mean, that's the difference between like first place and sixth.
Dude, that's what caused the crash was just this little... I missed my second downshift. I didn't have the engine brake, overcompensated with like a little too much brake, lean angle and throttle, and just lost the front. But then my team put everything together. I got back on the bike. I missed practice. So I only had one hot lap to get acclimated for race time. And then competed the next day in race 2 and got P2, which was awesome. But I do feel like I could have won the race. But I was modulating that thing you were talking about, that like go out and get them, and trying to like keep myself upright and not get too hungry. And, so like you negotiate that all the time. And I was trying to be weary of not biting myself by getting too hungry. But in hindsight, I feel like I was a little gentle, So like she was half of a bike length. I was like, I'm gonna get her on the last corner, set it up. And then I just didn't have enough time. It was literally half a bike length. But it was a really cool experience. The crash was my first high-speed crash, so it was like kind of got that out of the way. I was fine. I was like, okay, I can take a hit. I'm good. And so that was like kind of a threshold I stepped over in a sense. And then having the success the next day was awesome. And then it gave me a lot to think about. So the crash was really informative, and I'm grateful for it. In a way, it made me a better rider, a more conscientious rider. And it was, I think, an obstacle that inevitably gave me a victory at the end of the season. When I see it in hindsight, I attribute it a lot to that crash.
Well, my comment is I understand exactly what you're saying because one of the things that I avoided in my early years when my dad was working on the bike and we owned, my dad owned the bikes, us, and they were ours, is I felt much more comfortable riding than I'd get offered many times. You know, someone would say, hey, ride my bike in the open class or whatever. And sometimes I would go out and practice. But I didn't like it because I didn't want to damage it. And so I was very conscious about that. And of course, as I graduated up to factory teams, I became less worried about it because I burned up a couple of the factory bikes, and it's like, oh, well, they can fix it, you know. So, you know, it's
They got the money.
Yeah, they got the money. They can fix it. Or one time I crashed one, and this, I'm just being honest because, you know, that's what we should do, is I actually said as I was sliding along, and I knew my knee was hurt, is when the bike caught on fire, I said, just let it burn, you know. But, you know, that only happened once, Bill. So 29 years, I had, you know,
Did you not like the way that bike was set up to let it burn?
No, I did not like it. No, it was not. It was not what I.
It's not my friend.
Yeah, it was not my friend. And so this true story. The corner workers started running toward me. We were in Japan, and as soon as they saw the bike catching on fire, they just turned and started running toward the bike, right? And just leave me laying there. You know?
Well, you know.
You know?
That's show business.
That's show business, exactly. The show, we got to make sure, we got to put that fire out, you know, and that great motorcycle, you know. So
I
I
can't tell
understand.
you how many times I've heard. So I'm like new to racing. I didn't start riding until I was 36, so I did like a full immersion, got into it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, that's racing. Someone's like wadded their bike, broken their leg, you know, they're out of pocket, they're in a cast, and it's always like, well, that's racing. I guess that's show business.
You know what, that in show business they go, oh, you know, that's how business is done. I still don't know what that means. It's just like, is that how business is done? That kind of sounds like you're screwing me over, but I guess that's how business is done.
When did you like fall in love with bikes, or what has your relationship been like with motorcycles?
Well, I always wanted one as a kid, but my parents were both in the medical field, so that was not going to happen. And they also like kept me away from contact sports. You know, they saw early on the cognitive damage of football and hockey, so I was more playing like baseball. I still play pickup hockey and stuff like that, but you know, I kind of missed the window with, you know, learning how to ride on a dirt bike. And then I remember Honda came out with a bike, the Honda Rebel, and it was
Yes.
$1,200. And I was making, you know, about $200 a week working in a warehouse. So I thought, maybe I could swing that. So, you know, I mean, I don't even know what it was as far as like, it was probably a 125. I mean, it was nothing you'd want to ride out on the street. You couldn't get out of the way of anything. But, so I asked my parents, and they're like, oh, no. You know, the whole thing. You get a bike, you might as well buy a coffin to go with it. So, I don't know. I always had a love of machines, and I like manual transmission. I love going through the gears. I love, you know, slowing down, using the engine and the stuff you guys were talking about. So as I got older, I kind of undid a lot of things where, like, you know, my takeaway from public school was I was dumb and I didn't like to read.
Same.
And what I didn't realize was, you know, I had a lot of childhood trauma, so it was hard for me to focus. And then also, I wasn't interested in reading Beowulf.
Me neither.
Okay? I was trying to get a girlfriend. Like I don't care about this Shakespeare stuff or whatever you're telling me. So it took me until, you know, I was almost 30 years old where I was like, oh, wait a minute. I can go to a bookstore and buy a book on something I would want to read about. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I actually enjoy reading. And I read a bunch of the classics and stuff like that. And then some more modern stuff like, you know, I went through a whole bunch of books. That guy who wrote Train Spotting and all that, Marabou Stork Nightmares. I read all of those. And I've read some history books and stuff. And then it just sort of, and I say, oh, I always wanted to play hockey. We didn't have the money to play hockey. I got older, started playing pickup hockey. And it just sort of became, oh, I can like, It's public school. I don't know. It's weird. Like they will, you get into this pecking order. Oh, I'm a loser. I'm stupid, and you take these really negative things if you're not careful into life. So, I don't know. As I got into older cars, living out in LA, and going onto YouTube and seeing how engines actually work and differentials and all of this type of stuff, I just sort of became like the way I watch sports. I got into motorsports like that. And then I had a buddy of mine, Dean Del Rey, who rode. He goes, dude, we'll get you a biking toy, learn how to learn. He goes, take the motorcycle safety course. So that's what I did. And I had a Triumph Bonneville. And that's what I did. I started riding that thing. But I was riding scared, and I just got away from it. I was like, you know what? I don't have the confidence. I didn't know how to improve. So I sold the bike. And then what happened is I went to Coda, and I went with Dean, and he knew the guys at Ducati, and they had this, sort of mom and dad lap. They called it the hero lap that you could do after the sprint on Saturday. And I rode a Ducati. I don't know what it was. I forget. I always forget what it was called. It has like the big, like almost upside down, looks like a home plate front headlight on it. And I rode it, and it just got in my blood again.
Was it a scrambler?
No, it was the
because it has that
Diablo something or other. I don't know.
What you say? Diablo?
It might have been that one.
Yeah.
I got a picture of it somewhere, but I just got back in, and then I've always loved the big Harley baggers, but I'm weird, dude. I like everything. I like a BMW. I like a Ducati. I like classic Hondas from like the 70s and Suzukis that I grew up with, when I first thought motorcycles were cool. And it just kind of got into me, when I got into aviation, flying helicopters and stuff, and where I was flying out of, I got a hangar. Motorcycle doesn't take up a lot of space. The canyons are right there. And I just started riding the canyon. I do it during the week when all those Fast and Furious kids are working on their cars and bikes and stuff. They go up there on the weekends, and I stay away. I like cruising, dude. I'm a chill cigar smoking. I like to just sort of like, I'm not trying to drag a knee.
Well, we can work on that.
I would only work on that with you. I'm kind of fascinated now, like with people who ride those big bikes are scary because once it gets to about 11 o'clock, if you don't have your speed, it's going down. And I don't have the strength to get the stupid thing. I found that out a couple of times. I got to get help to get the thing back up. And, that just to be in like I can lean and not turn the front, but I get nervous about at a slow speed turning the front and giving it the right amount of throttle so you can have an even tighter circle. I'm like, I would like to try that, but I also like my motorcycle. So my thing is like, how do I learn without ruining my bike? Because I'm going to fall.
Yeah, well, you don't have to. One of the great things, and Bill and I have talked about this, because he mentioned Coda. We just were at Coda together. Bill came in on Saturday, and we had a meeting set up. Anyway, it's another thing, but it was so great because Bill was like a kid on Christmas. I mean, his excitement level was incredible, and I was privileged, and I loved showing him. We went to see race control and the steward's room, and then took him in some of the garages, and we got a picture with Mark, which was cool. And
Pecco, I met him
Pecco, and we hung out in the Alpine Stars hospitality, and it was just great, and that cemented all the things that we have in common. And so one of the things Bill and I have talked about since really his podcast was about, I'm going to come out to California, and we're going to ride together. And I'm going to get Bill, because Bill mentioned already the number one thing that most riders experience, especially in the beginning, but even if they may have ridden for 30 years, they never get over being scared. And so that prevents so much of the enjoyment from happening.
That happens in comedy too.
Yeah, I can imagine. It makes you hestant.
it prevents growth.
Right.
So then what happens is, like, when you start as a stand-up comedian, your biggest fear is, oh my God, I'm going to bomb. Everyone's going to sit there. What is that like? So then you experience it. And what you don't realize as a young comic is that you're going to be with a bunch of open micers, and they've gone through it too. And like comics, it's sort of this band of brothers thing, and then it becomes like this badge of honor to be able to stand up there in that humiliation and take it. But then what happens is, once you learn how to kill and you get a reputation as being a funny man or woman on stage, if you bomb, it's sort of a thing. It isn't this open micro bomb. It's like Bill Burr went up and ate it, So you can be afraid of that, or just afraid of that. I don't ever want to feel that again. So then you kind of figure out, you learn how to kill and how to have a good set. So you're like, okay, so this works. And then you just do that. So then you've hit this new level, and rather than it being a step, it becomes a plateau, and you just sort of stay there. And then that's how you sit there going like, well, how is that guy better than, what happened? I was here and that person said, what's going on is they kept going up the steps. And to go up the steps, you have to keep falling down them. It's almost like a video game where you can't get past this level. You got to keep going in there until you figure it out. You got to keep going. So the things that I've learned as a comedian is I apply it to being a dad, a husband, and everything that I do. Making an espresso. I just keep, I just throw myself into things knowing that I'm going to fail. And I always try to have like that sense of humor.
Yes.
About how screwing up is funny.
Yeah.
I started looking at failure as, it's not a failure. It's just a funny story to tell somebody, and it's also like, I'm going to get better. So,
well, you know what you're saying, Bill, which I think is fascinating, is that we talk a lot about, because it's the tools that Camille was a professional skier, and then, as she said, she got into motorcycling later. Of course, I started at 4 years old riding in my yard, and that's the tools that I've used to go through the struggles with and to create the awareness that has helped me in life. What you've done is you started out in a very conservative way, but you knew you had something special as a kid. Something was going on. Obviously you weren't interested in books and stuff, girls, I get all that, right? So you took that, and then you've used it to make your mistakes and struggles. And as you said, bomb, you learned how to kill it. I know you know that, because every podcast that I've listened to, and I've listened to hundreds of you, they're all great. And I know the comedy specials are great too. They're just, your insight and your timing is like me on a motorcycle. My timing and my insight and my recognition of what to do now to be able to accomplish what I want to do out there is exactly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of what you're saying, that you learn that and then you apply it to motorcycles.
Yeah, no, I find I am fascinated with machines. There's something about them where they're not alive, but they are. And I just like, where do they want to be? Where do they like to be? And then once I figure out where they like to be, what can I do with that?
Right.
It's the same thing like I play drums, tuning up a drum. There's this thing where you're starting to get a sound, and then there's all the way up to where you choke it off. And it's like, okay, so this is where this thing wants to live. So let me be in that. And then that helps, like, with me and my wife. Like, what does she like to do? She's not a morning person. All right, I'll take care of the breakfasts and stuff like that. What am I doing that, where, I try to stay in where it's cool. I don't need any more back and forth. And, not to being a comedian getting heckles, right? I don't need, I get enough back and forth doing what I do for a living. So it's very, like, it's so weird. Like, I imagine, like, all the stuff, Camille, that you learned racing and like skiing, that it's like, okay, now I have to apply this with, rather than with my skis, I apply this with my a machine, but like the things that I learned. I mean, don't you feel like you learn how your brain works? Where
Yes.
when you're young, you're like, oh, you're going to this bad place, and then you want to avoid the bad place. You start to learn tricks. Like I can know when I'm sort of careening towards writer's block, or I'm not excited about doing. What do I mean? I'm not excited about doing. I still love stand up. What is going on? What is going on with me right now? And then I know I have like these mental games I can kind of do on stage to sort of almost somersault my way out of that going down to the
Right.
thing, the bottom of the lagoon, as I call it. So,
Well, it's
I
the
don't know.
same,
What
Bill.
was-
I mean, everything you're saying about what you experience, I can relate to it, except mine is in a. You said something which is perfect a while ago. You said about the difference between an open mic bomb and being Bill Burr and having a bad set. Because the expectation level is exactly the same with you as it would be with me when I had number one on the front of my bike,
yeah.
right? And so
Well, that's the thing you
every
wanna
time I
get
came
there.
out of the pits, there was an expectation to be a world champion, right?
So that was the first, like, the first pressure as a comic is like, can I be funny? And then when you start getting actual paid gigs, you have to go up there and deal with the pressure of they don't know you, and then show them that you're funny.
Right.
Right. But then once you deliver and you get a fan base, which is, do you think, oh my God, when I have a fan base, they're going to come to see me and I can relax. And then you have to deal with this new pressure of expectation. Oh, we
Right.
saw you on your thing and you were this funny, so you better be at least this funny, if not better. And then then that you have to learn to have that poise. All it is
Right.
just being as relaxed as we are right now, talking to each other while doing whatever it is
Yes.
that you do.
Right.
And, that's where I guess like experience comes in.
Listen, I know, Bill's got giving us some time here, and so we're going to wrap this up in a minute, but I love all that, and it's been incredible listening. Obviously, Camille, that is so incredible of you to share all of that, because every single thing you said, and the same with Bill, is I relate it to situations like, for example, where you said about reacting and just reacting to the other person. Well, I relate that in motorcycling to making a mistake and then dwelling on it. I say to myself, if I make a mistake going in the corner, I forget about it before I get to the middle of the corner, because all that matters is I correct the trajectory or put the bike in the best position I have, considering I made that mistake, so that my exit will be just as good as I need it to be, right? And that's basically, that's a lot of what we're saying, is that, we and I'm guilty of it as much as anybody. And like, I know better, and I kick myself for, I know not to react that way, because I know the consequences of it's carrying on, the mistake and the misery, whether it's on the racetrack, on the motorcycle, or in life. And I have to constantly remind myself. And so, kind of to wrap this up, I think, we're talking about self-awareness, right? It's situational awareness and understanding ourselves. And that's what, unfortunately, in everyday life, we know the type focus it takes, Bill, for you to be the comedian you are, and how you relate to the audience, and how you came through that phone to me on your podcast, and the effect it had on my mood and helped me through the night. You understand that innately, and also through practice and struggles. Camille understands that through her life experiences, through her skiing, professional skiing, when her expectations when she was a little girl were incredible. She almost made it to the Junior Olympics, right, Camille?
I made it to the Junior Olympics.
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
You made it to the
I
Junior
quit after
Olympics.
that. Yeah, I got
Yeah,
schooled
and
there
you
and was
stopped
like, I'm
after
done.
that because because of other things that got you
Expectations
distracted.
and pressure. And I'm like, I'm not
Right.
that good. I'm out.
Right. And
Yeah.
so you belittled what you were capable of and didn't follow through with your abilities.
Not till I was 30.
That's where, right. I mean, there were things that, I talk a little bit about in my book, and we'll talk about on the show at some point, that happened when I was a kid that could have easily derailed my focus and my progress and my path. And I'm look back, and instead of criticizing that, I look at it as instead of it defining me, I look at it as it helped me get through that, and I gained strength, which then I used later in life with my racing and with life, that would help me stay true to my path. And, that's what's so great, I think, that comes through in your comedic routines, Bill, and in your things that you do. I see little shorts, and you play JFK. I saw that the other day. That was pretty cool. Yeah,
You look a
with
lot
the hair and
different
everything.
with
It's
hair.
true.
I'm telling you, yeah. I was like, he looks a lot different.
You were carrying it. So, the thing is that, I think we all have been through these struggles. But one thing we want to tell the audience is that, just because Bill is so successful, look what he's talked about today and what he went through to get to that. And that's why he's so great at what he does. And Camille, I'm so proud of you, for what you've overcome. And then, to work with you, because that's how we met, the BTR program, right? We selected you to be part of our team. And it was one of the best choices we've ever made. And you were perfect. And then, just my case, real quickly, is, I had struggles and things that I've already said, went through and stayed the course. And that's, what we want to inspire the audience of any generation. The younger you are, the better it is to get over it, so then it doesn't affect your life for years to come, right? And that is something that we hope comes across, and we'd like for the audience to learn from.
Yeah, when you finally figure it out, don't beat yourself up that it took you that long either.
Exactly.
Honestly,
Exactly.
I think that's really huge, and I will keep this brief. But when you were saying, when in hindsight, like looking at a big healing thing for me was, I used to go through my experience always kind of like with a funny, like, that was, how crazy was that type of thing, or be critical about it. But when I reviewed my experience objectively and looked at myself as a little girl, not some tough guy that had a crazy experience, but as a child who didn't have her needs met, and I was like, oh my God, you are so strong, you're so brave, you did all of that stuff. And so rather than being like, I haven't accomplished this yet, and I'm broken, and I haven't done this, I was like, boo, you've been through it, and you made it? And so
Right.
just that like shift in my thinking was huge.
Makes all
So
the
that's
difference in the world.
100%. It's like focusing on your
like
turn in and being like,
it's
no.
like exactly. It's like I said, is life is like me looking at a corner.
Yeah.
A corner
Keeps
is a
going.
left or a right. I break it into 3 sections. And I have to get the first one right to get the second one, third one. If I make a mistake in one, I forget about it. And just the only thing that matters is I make the correction and move on, right? And that's not easy to do. Well, Bill, I just want to say thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming
no worries.
on.
I enjoyed this. And,
I did too.
It's fun talking to people that are in racing, man. I'm a huge fan of what you guys do.
Likewise.
Well, I
want to
appreciate
keep
that.
rapping.
And we're
talking
big
about-
fans of what you do. So
Yeah,
Oh,
get into the
thank you.
drums and the helicopter flying. Like, we didn't even touch on that, but...
Well,
That was all
I'm-
trauma response. If I'm learning how to do those things, I don't have to deal with what's happened to me. So that's why I like riding a motorcycle, because I have to pay attention to what I'm doing, or bad things can happen. So everything that I'm kind of goes away. But then I get off the bike and it's still, it's bad.
Yeah,
so
well,
can't run
hopefully
from it.
the things will, you'll continue to learn, and hopefully those positive thoughts I mean, not that you
It'll
need any
happen.
help.
I'm
with
looking
it.
forward to.
Yeah, I can't wait.
To that day when that happens. So
I
all right,
can't
Freddie.
wait.
Thank
We're
you,
going to
Camille.
do that
Thank you,
really
guys.
soon.
Okay.
So, thank you, Bill. Have a good
No
day.
worries. All
All
right.
right,
Same to you.
everybody out there, we thank you for tuning into the podcast, and you can go to Patreon because we'll have some continuing talks on there, and hope to see you next time.